around the facilities industry for quite some time, investment banking, consulting, and then into GSK. I ran the sort of West London estate, including the global HQ. Got closely involved in a couple of big global outsourcing exercises, alongside our colleagues in our manufacturing business and our vaccines business. Then I went on to lead the real estate and facilities integration when we did a big M&A deal with Novartis. And I've just coming out the tail end of that. And I'm the person at the moment who gets packets of work to do. So what I mean by that is there's a piece of work we want to do to try and get our local operating companies around the world and bring them into a more of a centralized facilities structure. There is no mandate, so every single business unit we talk with is a conversation, and we have to try and bring them along and get them into that. And also we have our major contracts coming up again in mid-2019. And we're just trying to really get our heads around what we should do in relation to that. And that's another piece of work I've been asked to lead. So that's a bit of background. The inevitable slide about the company, which I won't dwell on. What I'd really like you to take away is it's a big company. That we're talking about a huge manufacturing operation. We're talking about multi-billion pound sales. But what we have done over the past sort of 10 years is move away from the reliance on one or two very profitable pharmaceuticals, drugs. We've diversified into the vaccines arena, and we've increasingly going into consumer healthcare, and that's what our deal with Novartis was all about. We are, I think, in virtually every country around the world. There we deliver products, and one of the things which we'll come back to again a bit later is sort of the social responsibility agenda and the so-called right to trade, which is a very big thing in the company. And funnily enough, in facilities we get asked to support that in a number of different ways. So this first slide is really all about me. And I'm sure people have seen the adverts on the telly, for, I think is it Sky, about the children being the masters of entertainment. And when I was sort of starting to think about this presentation, I had a bit of a research around on the web, etc., and came across all these terms like digital natives and digital immigrants and all these types of things. And the reason I think it's relevant is that as we start to move forward, there's going to be people like me who frankly struggle a little bit at times with technology. And there's going to be people like this young guy and my own children who are truly digital natives. So my kids sit at home at the same time as they're doing their homework online. They're texting, they're using other sorts of applications. And the blurring between what they do, what their work, and how they connect with their friends and how they get things done, and that their ability to multitask is completely different than mine. And yet, give it another 10 years, they'll be in the workplace and I'll be in the workplace. So how do you think about accommodating that range of people and what they're going to try and do? And it was quite interesting. I did this thing where the title of this, Unlocking the Potential, I thought, well, okay, so how should I structure this? What should I talk about? So I thought, well, look, what does this really mean? So in terms of our organisation and thinking about what comes next, are we really in a position where we can do it in-house? Do we have the qualities? Do we have the abilities to set ourselves up for future success? The second thing is, have we actually got the energy to do it? Because frankly, the more you get into these conversations, It's like peeling an onion. There's another layer of conversation. There's another layer of discussion. There's another piece of work that needs to go that bit deeper. So it's going to take a lot of energy. And actually, do we have the potential to really turn it into something meaningful? And actually, I think from a positive point of view, I think we do as an organisation. But we're really just starting off on the next stage. Historically, looking back a little bit, we've been fairly successful in some of the elements of bringing today's workplace into reality. So we've done the sort of smart working piece, however you want to describe it. We've done the collaborative spaces piece. We're fortunate enough to have scale. So in some of our buildings, we're able to have things like a hairdresser's, which is there on a concession basis. We've got a shop in most of our big buildings. We're big on the old transport stuff, so we've even got a bike shop and bike maintenance facility. And we do this all around the world, but that has taken a long time, and it's been a real journey. And some of the folks who are here today were with us quite early on in that journey when we started to do smart working, and we started to bring some of the sort of technologies in and change the workplace. But what I'm quite proud to be able to say is what you're looking at here is there's London, there's Singapore, Istanbul, and Philadelphia. But actually, for most of those locations, when you go there is a look and a feel which is recognisable as GSK. It's never going to be perfect, but that's we're on a good path there. And we do a lot now of things like the manifestation with the branding to try and bring products and what we do as a global organisation to life. And that's really good. People appreciate it, and I think we are getting there to bring ourselves up to date today. Okay? Increasingly, as an emerging theme, when we do the branding, when we work with the business, they're asking us to do a lot more in things like promoting the Save the Children partnership. And this comes back to A, it's the right thing to do, but B, it's this idea of the right to trade. We are an organisation that has ideally has some morals, would like to try and eradicate diseases in Africa and all of those good things. And we try and bring that into the workplace. Increasingly, we're starting the discussion now about this whole idea of well-being, or whatever you want to call it. So the gyms, the coffee bars, the interactive space, allowing people to, frankly, do their social networking whilst they're in the building, from the internet-enabled, internet-enabled open wireless areas, which is basically everywhere, and that type of thing. So we're trying to learn, what's modern, what do people want, with varying degrees of success. And the reason I say that is actually we're a company that has a very low turnover of staff. And some of these are not always welcomed. So it's taken us a while, but we actually now have quite an established change management process for bringing people through the journey into these new workplaces. Oh, sorry. And it's been one of those journeys, I think, where we've had to build and build and build, and now we've as an organisation, we have to push less, and the business is pulling more. And part of that comes from the fact that the whole workplace, smart working concept have struggled, I think, to really have a really absolutely firm metric where you can say, yes, it's made this difference in terms of productivity, etc. There's always been a sense that it's the right thing to do, but the organisation now, for me, within GSK, has reached the point whereby the resistance has really faded away, bled through the sands. And a couple of things really made the difference. First of all was the investment in the change management exercise. And I have to say, it's a lot of time, effort and money, but it does get people through the process of going from whatever their traditional workspace was, wherever they are in the world, into this type of environment. We had a set of guidelines written were written internally to help people know how they should behave. But probably the key point was when our CEO, who's actually just retired from the company, Andrew Whitty, decided to come down out of the 12th floor of the tower block and move into open plan smart working on the ground floor, visible to everybody in our building. And those sorts of signals, together with the experience, have really made a difference. And actually, just out of interest, we now go within these guidelines. It's about 7 desks for every 10 people. We have a very transient organisation, so we've gone down that route. But we do have lots of quiet booths. We use the wraparound furniture so people can have quiet conversations, all those sort of good things. And thankfully, we're an organisation which has been able to fund that. And I know not all our organisations are that lucky. So I think we've got a good track record. We've got some of the qualities and abilities to be able to move forward to the next stage. All we need to do now is try and work out what the next stage is, because I can't come here with any answers, but I can come and share with you some of the challenges. And for me, this is the main one. There's all sorts of signals out there around systems and platforms, around what's the next evolution of the workplace. What do our business customers, what are they looking for? What should our organisation look like? How do we work with our procurement colleagues? And one of the things that I'm getting a sense of is there is so much change, so much opportunity out there, whether that's through technology, whether that's through the new people, new folks coming into the workplace, whether that's a change in, frankly, where the talent is, which country is it in, which part of each country is it in, that there's a lot of things moving. So trying to read the signs of and develop our strategies is actually quite difficult. And there's always that danger that at the point you put a stake in the ground, before you know it, you're looking at it in your rear-view mirror. Because, frankly, I'm not sure that the rear-view mirror is that useful anymore. We can learn from some of the mistakes we've made, but there's so much pace, so much change in the system. And for us, we've got an added complication with a new CEO starting this month, who's come from our consumer healthcare division. And she is a very competitive, very market-focused lady who's got a background in L'Oreal, then moved into consumer healthcare, and now has moved into essentially the head of a pharma business. So we're expecting some things to change, and she is only going to put her foot on the accelerator. It's not going to get any slower. So that's going to be fun. So this is one of the big challenges that we're facing at the minute. Is you could almost call it jostling for space, and who owns which part of the agenda. So we've got finance colleagues, we've got embedded finance people, we've got our colleagues in IT and in procurement. So we've got the functions, and then we've got the business. And we are a global business, but we're also made up of pharma, consumer, and vaccines, and they have different drivers, different business cycles, different pressures and opportunities. So we're having all of these conversations. We've got the CFO who wants us to continue to take money out of the business, primarily in the real estate space. But of course it bleeds into FM. We've got our colleagues in procurement who always have a view on what we should be doing with our contracts. And we're having a debate with them at the moment about how we can define the appropriate cost of our services. Not the lowest cost, but the one that meets our quality challenges, which are big in our regulated spaces, and those that allow us to develop the workplace opportunity, work with service partners, and also to try and convince them that whilst we might have taken out 20% of our FM cost base over the last 5 years, probably closer to 10, that there isn't a lot left. You know, we've been through outsourcing a number of times. We no longer have a significant GSK internal organisation. And frankly, we've had a couple of instances of quality issues in our regulated space because we've kept squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. But now I personally don't think there's a lot left. There's always opportunity to do things smarter, but we can't keep squeezing the same piece of fruit and expecting the juice to keep on dripping. And I think this is really an agenda we want to start to drive. So the way we're starting to line up and get ourselves organised is in 3 different areas. So first of all, there's the real estate piece. And we're fortunate enough to have, over the last few years, developed a really strong real estate leadership team, working with some key partners who have managed to get their arms around the data. They've managed to get their arms around what we've got where. Believe it or not, 5 years ago we didn't know where half of our properties were, because we've grown through so much through acquisition. We have local operating companies in a lot of places who frankly have been doing what they wanted to do. But a lot of effort's gone into corralling all of that. So at least we're starting to get an understanding of what we've got. We've got a group of people, which I'll talk about more in a minute, a 2030 group. Doesn't really matter what the date is, but they're a group of people who are looking into the future of the workplace and trying to corral that. And we're also trying to think about how we work with our suppliers and our contract platforms. So what's the real estate piece? Well, broadly on that agenda, what we've got going on is a conversation around access to talent, and people who, some of whom we've probably heard from today, who are looking at, what does that talent look like? What do they need? What's their behaviours and all those good things? But also, where are they? Where do they want to be in the future? And how can we make that our workplace attractive to them? And I'm not sure what that means, but that's what's being talked about. On a more practical note, historically we've owned a lot of property. We're moving away from that pretty quickly, other than in our heavily invested R&D facilities. So sale and lease back, new properties are taken on as flexible lease terms as we can get, and all those good things. In terms of agility, that links back to tenure, but we're also doing things like moving our sales office networks in those countries where we still have them, mostly in Asia, into Regis facilities. So we are trying to make it as flexible as possible. It might have a short-term cost uplift, but the pace of change in these environments is so fast. And actually, they're really only going to the office to meet with colleagues and perhaps get on some decent technology, video conferencing, whatever it might be. So we're increasingly thinking about that as an option. Who needs to be where? Over a period of time, we've consolidated a lot of back office functions into business service centres. So those business service centres are in Poland, Costa Rica, Kuala Lumpur, places like that. So what we've been doing is moving people out of the high cost areas. A lot of those functions, finance, some of the HR functions, some of the IT functions, used to be in places like London, where it's just an expensive place to have real estate. We're changing that model. We've probably taken that about as far as we're going to, but that's what we've done. Shared spaces, we've actually got people now looking at the idea of these companies who offer you the chance just to come in and sit amongst other companies in places like this. And you think, well, what's that got to do with the pharma industry? And actually, we've got increasingly people doing sort of digital media content and all this type of thing. And a lot of them live and work around London. We don't have offices other than on the west of London and out into Hertfordshire. So this is an opportunity that people are looking at because the world is changing. And frankly, it's all new to me. This is what people are doing now. We didn't have a digital function, a digital content group 3 years ago. Now there's probably hundreds of them. Maintaining our Twitter presence and all those good things. The 2030 group, this is quite interesting. So the head of Worldwide Real Estate and Facilities wanted to try and get a group of people together to think about what the technologies coming into the workplace might look like. But actually it's a real challenge in an organisation like ours because getting an application onto our IT network is virtually impossible now. There's so many stage gates. The whole direction of travel has been to reduce the number of applications, etc., etc. So what we're going to try and do is set up a couple of workplaces, probably one in Spaces, one in West London, and one probably somewhere in the US, and possibly one in a new building we're opening in Singapore, and essentially have it off the network and do a couple of things. Number one is try and work with potential suppliers for them to come in and try out, in the real world, some of their technologies, their furniture, whatever that looks like, and get some business units to come and use it and give us some feedback to try and do something real. But we got into some good discussion. So this group have just kicked off. And one of the things that was making me smile was, they came back and pointed out what's pretty obvious, that most of us use technology at home now that you don't use it in the workplace. So whereas when I started work, the first place you got a laptop was at work. The first time you were on a PC was at work. The first time you got given a mobile phone or an iPad or whatever, it was all through work. Now you've got folks using these, what's it called, Alexa or whatever it is that you talk to. You've got all sorts of people using technology at work, at home, ahead of the time that they use it at work. And these guys and girls are going to dig into that. Oh, going to go back one. No, I'm not. Very quickly, this made me smile. I saw this in somebody sent it to me online, and it's so much about where I think we are today. So you've got pointy head boss, who's talking to his assistant to book a meeting. He doesn't know that his phone can do it, and his phone does it for him. You've got the poor lady there suddenly realising her job's on the line. And you've got all of these things going on. And I think that what this really says to me is exactly where we are today. We've got all this technology that we can use, but we're not using it. There's a whole raft of people who are going to be impacted as things change. And yet we've got things in our world like a meeting manager system that somehow is going to have to talk to this phone and sort it all out. And I think this is the reality of where we are today. And you probably have a whole load of younger people than me certainly, looking at this and laughing. But it's got real implications for the people that you see in that cartoon. Very quickly, the last one, in terms of our direction, is the contract platforms. I'll keep this one brief because essentially what we're talking about here and what our thinking is okay, we've been through the IFM journey. We've probably stretched that a little bit too far. Chances are next time round we're going to de-scope some of our high-risk infrastructure, and we do some scientific services as well, and put them more with specialist organisations. So we're still going to have this IFM bundle, but if it's been squeezed, which it has been, how are we going to differentiate the suppliers, whether that's Sodexo, CBRE, ISS, whoever it is? What role is technology going to play in that? What role is their ability to work with us, potentially invest in workplace technologies, whatever that might look like? What is their real capability in this new environment? And these are the things we're starting to think about. And also, if we do want to go down the route of kind of a co-investment, then you're starting to look at longer contract terms and different ways of motivating the supplier, through SLAs and KPIs. What will they be? And I haven't got the answers, but this is what we're thinking about. And when it comes to rounding that up, there's a lot of things going on, but that's how we're trying to break it down and package it up, or start to package it up, so that we can start to turn it into something and have those conversations with IT, procurement, and all the others, and get those rolling. With some of these things, we want to start to be at least shaping those conversations and making sure we're part of them, rather than finding out some of these conversations have happened without us. And believe it or not, when we kicked off the 2030 group, we found that in the office of the CEO, somebody had been given the job of going out and establishing the workplace for the future, but they just didn't bother to mention it to us. All fun and games. So, last couple of slides, I'm going to run through these really quickly. We're starting to think about our services slightly differently. So, we're starting to think of them in three different packages. So, environmental services, which is more about the traditional building and environment. But then services which people experience. So in today's terms, that might include the sort of business services, so meetings and virtual meetings, but also things like the gymnasiums, etc. So they are experiencing those. And then a little bit more about those that are selected. So things which people ultimately are making a real decision about what they do and how they use it. And within that, there's all this terminology going around. And frankly, I'm not familiar with, I can quote the words back to you, but I come to events like this to try and learn more, understand more, so I can then take that back and try and frame up what it really means in my business's context. It won't be the same as probably your business context, but there will be overlaps. We've got a big estate, as I said previously. We've got buildings which are new and shiny, and we've got some right dogs out there, real horrible buildings which we want to dispose of where we can. So you've got to think about where you're going to make investments. You've got to think about how you're going to take things forward. And that's where we are. I hope it's given some food for thought. Happy to, a couple of minutes left. Have any questions?